Ever wonder how some people are able to conquer some of the most ridiculous feats in Destiny? Things like low man raids, solo grandmasters, and flawless raids? Well, it comes down to a lot of practice, but also a lot of preparation. That preparation is done on the crafting table. The build crafting table, that is. This is going to be a general explanation of how to build craft in Destiny 2. Everything here will apply to both PvE and the Crucible. This is not going to be my opinions on stats or breakdowns of what the best mods and fragments to run are. Rather, this is going to be an objective look at builds and how everyone can enjoy what I consider to be one of the most satisfying parts of D2. I will be going into a lot of detail, and of course, if you want to, a build can be just a couple of fragments plus an exotic. This will be for those who want to take a deep dive and get the most out of their build. I will include timestamps throughout the video, and there will be a full example build craft later. Without further ado, let's begin the build crafting process. The first thing I'd like to cover would be the combat loop. The combat loop is what happens in the minute-to-minute fights that makes your build function. For example, you get kills with your demolitionist weapon, you get your grenade charge back, you throw your grenade, you gain volatile rounds after a kill, you make orbs of light on a kill, etc. Your combat loop can be as simple or complex as you want it to be. However, like the name implies, it should be recursive, i.e., it should be able to restart itself at the end. As you add weapons, aspects, fragments, and mods, think about how they add to your combat loop. The signs of a good build are how easily you can start the loop, how easily you can flow through the loop repeatedly, and how you minimize stopping. An example of stopping would be you need one of your abilities charged, but you have no way to accelerate the charge and just have to wait. As your build comes together, make notes on what the build offers you. This list is a good place to start. Record each time a part of the build contributes to one of these areas, and once you're finished with the build, look at what your build has and tweak it if need be. A big tip I have for the combat loop is make as many things overlap as possible, like multiple effects triggering when picking up an orb of light. The last thing to mention before moving on is that not all mod descriptions are accurate. At the time of this video, Empowered Finish states that it can be stacked, which isn't true. Grenade Kickstart states that its respective energy needs to be fully expended for it to activate, which is not true. If you have multiple charges, it actually still functions. The other kickstarts do follow this description, oddly enough. I'm going to leave some resources in the description as well for more detailed information. The first thing we need to select for any build is going to be the exotic armor that we're trying to use. These are the center of your build, and the effects of them should be built around as much as you can for maximum effectiveness. Be sure to read exactly what the exotic does, and don't assume you remember all of it. Not to mention some effects aren't even mentioned directly. There's so much to know in this game, and I definitely overlooked some of the effects too. After choosing your exotic armor, it's time to select your weapons. When selecting what weapons you like to use, consider the effects of your exotic armor. For example, if you're going for a grenade-heavy build, consider something with Demolitionist. Once again, your weapon exotic should be chosen carefully. Look for something that enhances your combat loop, works well with your aspects or fragments, and or whatever anti-champion capabilities you may need. This would also be a good time to do some research on heavy weapon DPS numbers, as they can vary season to season. Next, it's time to choose your subclass with aspects and fragments. If your exotic plays into a specific subclass, then your decision is very easy. If not, you may have some testing out to do. Keep in mind what your exotic is trying to do and find aspects that help accomplish this. Also, for new players, you can hover over anything in the subclass screen to get an explanation of the effects for that subclass, such as Devour, Scorch, and so on. Next, find about 5 to 6 fragments you'd like to use, and then narrow them down depending on how many fragments your aspects allow and which are the most important to the build. If you can't find a fragment to fill a slot, consider using one that has a stat boost in Resilience, Recovery, or Intellect, as these are the most expensive stats to boost with mods. Once you're ready to look deeper into your armor, check out d2armorpicker.com. It's this amazing calculator that can tell you what fragment, armor, and mod combos can get you the stats you desire. After you log in, start by clicking on your armor exotic. Then select any fragments below that change your stats. Then begin selecting the stat levels that you want to have. It's worth noting that armor drops have half of their stats in mobility, resilience, and recovery, and the other half in discipline, intellect, and strength. While hunters would love having 100 mobility, resilience, and recovery, it's just not possible. Prioritize certain stats and min-max as much as your armor will allow. This may also be a good time to revisit your fragments. If you have a slot you really don't need, it may be helpful to change it to a stat boosting fragment even if the effect isn't useful. Once you're happy with your stats, you can click on each available loadout to view what armor pieces and mods you need to accomplish those stats. Just be mindful of the stat mods necessary to reach those stats, as it will constrict your ability to add further mods into the build. The calculator puts the lowest cost of these mods at the top. If you're making multiple builds and don't want to overlap armor pieces, click the circle with a line through it for each armor piece and remove them from the pool. However, with loadouts, it is perfectly fine to overlap your armor. We'll get into how to do that later. Now that the armor has been chosen, it's time to tie the build together with mods. This is where you bolster up your important stats, boost your strengths, and patch up your weaknesses. This is also where you decide if you're running an armor charge build. If you are, either run a decaying setup or a stable setup based on what you need. Decaying setups take advantage of the blue mods, like surges. Stack as many of these decaying mods as you like. It doesn't change how fast your charge decays. This allows for temporarily higher stats, resilience, and weapon damage at the cost of needing a constant supply of armor charge. Be sure you have at least one way of generating armor charge easily with a build like this. Stable armor charge setups don't use the decaying mods and instead use the yellow mods like kickstarts and finisher mods. These can be just as powerful as the decaying mods in the right setup. The green mods supplement your armor charge. Stacks on Stacks and Time Dilation are very nice for decaying setups, especially when used together. The white basic mods like Siphons, Reserves, Resists, etc. are good on every build. I like to stack Resist on my chest and use one scav on my legs. Fastball is great for grenade builds, but sometimes exotics, such as Ashen Wake and Sunbracers, have it built in. One key note here is that if your build doesn't have enough space to fit the stat mods in with everything else, it may be worth going back to D2 Armor Picker to select some new armor that accommodates smaller capacity stat mods. Loadouts allow your entire equipment selections to be saved on a click. Keep in mind that you can only use dim loadouts from the tower, the helm, or orbit, but it allows for more customization than the in-game loadouts. The in-game loadouts can be used anywhere. I'm going to continue to use dim for this because it allows for ornament selections and shader selections as well. As we know, fashion is the true endgame and very important for the build. A quick disclaimer before we get into the build. As of May 10th, Bungie released a rundown on all of the exotic changes happening next season, and Burning Steps is actually losing the ability to stack with Surge mods. If you decide to copy the build, just know it will need some tweaking in a couple weeks. Now we're going to get into our full example. This one's going to be a little less edited, a little more off the cuff, just to show you exactly what a build looks like when it's being made. We're going to be doing a Path of the Burning Steps build with Prometheus Lens as our weapon. The goal of this build will be to create a tanky titan focused around weapon damage boosts, restoration, and ammo drops to make the most out of Promo Lens. I've already done some Burning Steps testing on another build, so I'm going to pass over that. Just to check what Burning Steps does, take a look. Solar Weapon Final Blows periodically grant you an escalating damage bonus. Actually, this is not just weapon, this is actually Solar Final Blows, so look carefully. But the bonus itself is to weapon damage. And then the stuff about freezing when you get frozen, it's not really going to happen all that often. I wouldn't rely on it too much. But this is the part we want to focus on. For Prometheus Lens, we have kills return ammo to the magazine, extending the beam's duration, and fires a solar trace beam that creates a field of heat energy that grows as the weapon is fired. Sustained damage applies Scorch. So we have a source of Scorch already, which is going to be very good for our subclass, which we're going to select first. Obviously, we want to be on Solar because extra ways to create solar kills is always going to be useful for Burning Steps, and we can also take advantage of Scorch. So this one's kind of a no-brainer. It would work in other subclasses because Surges can work on anything, and we're going to probably end up using Surges later, but obviously for synergy, we want to stick to Solar. So Super honestly doesn't really matter a whole lot. I like Hammer of Soul. I've always used Hammer of Soul. We're going to stick with that. The lift is completely up to you. Rally and Towering is sort of a personal preference. I'm going to leave it on towering for now, but if I have a reason to want a faster barricade, if it's more of an active part of our kit, I might choose rally. I'm going to be real with you guys. I don't ever use shoulder charge melees. It's not that it's bad. This is just so good. I love throwing hammer. I've been waiting. I'm sort of an old school D2 player. I was waiting for one day that middle tree and bottom tree solar could be combined, and I finally have that, and I'm not letting it go. You will pry this hammer out of my cold, dead hands. For our grenade, I'm probably going to stick to healing grenades. Like I said, we want to create a tanky titan focused around our weapon. So this is not a grenade build. The rest of these are all about damage or scorching or igniting. I want to just focus on my weapon as much as I possibly can, so we're sticking with healing nades. For the aspects, and what I was just telling you about bottom tree and middle tree, which was basically Sol Invictus and Roaring Flames, I love this combination. They are phenomenal. We have a way to create Scorch with our weapon, so sunspots are going to be everywhere. This is a no-brainer. And Roaring Flames gives me a way to create sunspots on demand with a very chunky hammer, and also give ourselves restoration from that and chunk down heavier targets where I don't want to expend all my ammo on. So Roaring Flames is kind of a no-brainer. I'm not saying Consecration is bad. I'm just saying it's not right for this build, I don't believe. It's another sort of ability-centric thing. If I was using like a melee setup, I'd probably go for this, because this is quite good. Just not right now. For our fragments, we're going to want anything that pertains to scorching or weapon final blows, especially with solar. And we're going to see what we can get out of that. So picking up a fire sprite grants restoration. That might be useful. We'll come back to that one. Solar grenade final blows cure you. Never going to want that on this build. We're using healing grenades. Your class ability recharges faster when you scorch targets. That might be useful. Benevolence. Applying things to your allies. See, this sounds like it would be good, but I've tested it, and if you reapply Radiant to yourself, it doesn't actually give you the boost again. It can't be activated more than once, which is the problem. If I could keep throwing my hammer and keep activating this for my allies, it'd be great, but you can't, so... And the discipline hit's pretty bad. Solar super projectiles, don't care, this is not a super setup. Solar weapon or ability final blows extend the duration of restoration and radiant effects applied to you. That is what I'm talking about. Empyrean, awesome. Awesome. I mean, the resilience hit hurts a little bit less now after they changed resilience, but all in all, very good. Combustion. Solar super, don't care. Torches. So, the thing about Radiant and Burning Steps, which I've already tested before, is that they don't stack. So, Radiant, if you don't have any stacks of Firewalker, can help you get your first couple stacks of Firewalker. But stack number 1 and Radiant are the same amount. So, it can help. I'm not saying it's bad. And Radiant does give you anti-champion capabilities and punch through on your weapons. It gives you anti-barrier, so you can shoot through enemies, which is really cool. However, I don't think Prometheus Lens actually does that, but anyway, we'll move on. Solar Ignitions, don't care. Tempering. Now, this one could be good. I'm going to plan on having a good recovery stat with a lot of restoration going on, which means the recovery stacks granted from tempering probably won't net me a whole lot of benefit, and airborne effectiveness, this is a PvE build, I don't really care. It's a laser as well, it doesn't really care what state it's in. But the last part, while it's active, Solar Weapon Final Blows create a fire sprite. Now, a fire sprite can grant us restoration. And I've done this before, and this seems really good. The problem is the restoration only lasts for like 2 or 3 seconds. It is not long. Now, in lower tier content, you can probably get another kill with Empyrean and extend the timer. It might work. However, the negative to recovery, I'm probably going to pass. Blistering. Solar Ignitions. Don't care. Now, Solus might not be bad. It's not the flashiest of things, but making Radiant or especially Restoration last longer is going to be pretty helpful, especially if you run into a beefier target and need those extra couple seconds to kill him while regenerating your health. Or just need a few extra seconds to get to the next group of enemies so you can extend it with Empyrean. Not a bad choice. Solar Ignitions, don't care. Apply more Scorch stacks to target. That's Tongue Twister. If I was going for an ignition setup, sure, that's all this is for, is making ignitions happen easier. I don't think we're really going to be getting many ignitions with Prometheus Lens, but if somebody proves me wrong, go for it. More ignitions, but it does give it plus to resilience, so if I have a free slot, I'd consider it. And then defeating scorched targets grants melee energy and creates a fire sprite. That sounds quite good. And it gives plus recovery. Can't say no to that. I also am now considering using this. Whereas tempering was giving me a negative, fire sprites do give a bit of grenade energy, which is in turn only going to give me restoration for a few seconds, but it's also going to get me my healing grenade back faster, which is never a bad thing. Never at all. So we're kind of between Solace, which might be useful. Singeing, I could see being useful if your class ability is up more often. And Mercy. So out of these, Torches I'm thinking about. But I actually think we're going to go Mercy. And I'm between Solace and Singeing. Now, neither of these actually change my stats, so I can change these at any time. But let's try Solace first. If it ends up being useful to have my class ability back more, I'll switch to Singeing and swap to Rally Barricade. Maybe then I can use Bomber and things to activate on my class ability and use that as part of my kit a little more actively. And that's our subclass for now. The next thing we got to do is go over to D2 Armor Picker. And here we are on D2 Armor Picker. So I've already logged in, and I've already selected our exotic, which is Path of the Burning Steps, obviously. It's generated some beautiful combinations here. We're going to go down. I've already selected Empyrean, Mercy, and Searing, which are our stat-changing fragments. Now, the last one didn't, so it's not on the list. All the advanced settings here, most of these you can probably ignore unless you have not a lot of masterwork materials or things like that, but I have quite a bit laying around, so we're going to masterwork everything. Now, going back to the original focus of the build was a tanky Titan focused on damage boosts and ammo drops and all that jazz. So the first thing we want to do is hit 100 resilience. This is going to be, that says 40%, that's a little old. It's actually 30% damage reduction in PvE. So the next thing we can do is I'm going to crank our recovery to about 80. I could go the whole way to 100. I could. But I don't want to constrict it too much. See, I want to have enough room to add mods, and I know if I put resilience and recovery at 100, it's going to want 4 or 5 mods that all cost 4 energy, which are the plus 10 to resilience or recovery, and I just don't want that right now. I think we can make do with 80, especially because the goal is to have restoration up 24/7. And speaking of restoration, let's get our discipline as high as it can get. And now we're at 70 discipline, and we've narrowed it down to just a few options at this point. Now, the first one, 180, 70, the being 2 off here and 2 over here is a bit unfortunate, but obviously you make do with what you can. I have some things disabled down here because I don't like overlap my armor pieces. That's a personal preference thing. You can obviously do it if you want. I like to have an entire set of armor that is dedicated only to that set of armor, so I can freely switch them around very quickly without having to change mods. So going into this, we have our beautiful setup here. We have what mods we need to make this work, including the 1 artifice slot. My class item is going to be artifice. If you don't have artifice armor, it'll just calculate this automatically. You don't have to worry about changing anything there. But yeah, the next thing we're going to do is transfer it all over to my Titan and start building. Here we are, back on D2 with our hideous armor setup, but that can obviously be fixed later. First thing I want to do, put on all of our stat boosting mods. So we need 3 Resil, 2 Discipline, and our Artifice needs to be in Strength. So, Strength. Now I'm going to prioritize putting the higher capacity mods, the Resil mods, in places where I think they'll have extra room. So in my head, I think I will have enough room. Arms tend to get a little crowded, so we're going to leave those with Discipline, and chest gets a little crowded too. So one thing I mentioned earlier was we were going to be using surge mods. So this immediately means we're going to be doing a decaying setup. So I want to get 2 surge mods. If you have the authorized solar mods artifact boost, you can get these for 1 energy apiece. Otherwise, my entire legs would be filled right now. And I'm going to use the last one as a solar scavenger because, again, we want to have enough ammo to sustain Prometheus lens. And immediately now you see we have 3 space left, and putting that Resil mod there was a good idea. Another easy one is going to be our chest. I like to throw in a bunch of resistances, again, because, I mean, it would be nice to have solar reserves on here and have more ammo, but ultimately I'm going to prioritize staying alive. So harmonic resist gives us that solar resist. It's going to be quite handy. This can all depend on how you're fighting too. If you tend to get very close, melee damage resistance, and tend to stay farther away, sniper damage resistance. I think I'm probably going to be somewhere in the middle, so I'm going to go concussive dampener. And now I have 3 energy left. Now, I do have the ability to run charged up. And I'm kind of considering it. But for now, I don't think I need it. It just increases the armor charge stacks by 1, so I can get up to 4, which would leave me at an entire minute of surge. Because I had the idea to already put on this little guy here, time dilation. It's going to bring us from 10 to 15 seconds on our surge. That's going to be very helpful. Now, while I really would like to run Special Finisher, and I know I already said you want to run one or the other, either Decaying or Stable. However, this is about fun. So you break the rules. You do whatever you want. If I find that this setup doesn't end up working, and I want to end up switching to Rally and, what was it, Singeing? Yeah, Singeing. Then the Reaper mod would actually be a very useful part of that. You could effectively cast your Barricade, then your next weapon kill would get you an Orb of Light, and then if you get a multi-kill, then you're getting 2 kills for 2 orbs, which is then going to give you 30 seconds of Surge. Not to mention the Firewalker stacks on top of that, which is quite nice. It would fill up the class item at this point, though, so if I had switched this with a Discipline mod, you may be able to squeeze out a Bomber on top of that as well, and get a little bit extra grenade, and I could see that setup working very well. However, for now, I think we are going to throw on Special Finisher and Proximity Ward. Proximity Ward gives you this nice overshield while in a finisher, and let me tell you, when you are in a finisher, you will not die if you have this. If you ever died when using a finisher and you don't want that to happen ever again, this mod is kind of wild. We're going to see how this works. Again, we need some testing, and I know this build is not going to be for endgame. This is going to be that low to mid tier content, just having fun with a laser. So I think running a mixed setup will actually work okay, because there will probably be enough orbs, enough enemies, and we want to keep this going as long as possible. Not to mention, surges are not our only form of damage boost. We have Path of the Burning Steps here. They are the biggest damage boost that you can get solo, anyway. I think it's tied with Banner Shield at like 40%, but Banner Shield obviously only works for your allies, not for you. Next thing we want to do is look up at our arms here. So, looking at the mods, I don't think we really need loaders, unless you were a compulsive reloader type of person, which I am, but this weapon reloads itself. There's no reason to. We don't need dexterity, we're not in PvP. Want to focus is a pretty solid idea. If we're running a decaying setup, we can run this at no extra cost, and that would put us at 100 discipline whenever we have armor charge, and we want to have armor charge all the time. Don't really need fastball. I'm throwing my grenades at my feet. Firepower wouldn't do any good. Momentum transfer wouldn't do you any good. Neither would bolstering. Kickstart? No, we're not going to spend that on grenades. Heavy-handed, though. Heavy-handed is very tempting. This is going to allow our hammer to make an orb of light, and if you don't have armor charge, and you maybe, or you're out of ammo, for example, and you're like, well, all I have to my name right now is this hammer, and, well, Roaring Flames and Soul Invictus take over, you start whacking people with the hammer, now you're at 3 armor charge, you do a finisher on an enemy, and now you have Prometheus Lens ammo. This is a great backup, and a great way to minimize stopping in the combat loop. Impact induction would also be very nice for getting that grenade back. We're going to be getting Soul Invictus, which will help bring our grenade back as well. We have fire sprites going on. Impact induction, I think, is just going to be one final step to ensuring that we never are without restoration. Now, the last part is going to be the head. We don't need targeting, not in PvP. Either solar or harmonic siphon they're both doing the same thing here, is going to be essential. Then we don't need super, so we don't need dynamo. Again, don't need that, don't care. You're going to get enough super from getting kills is the point. So Radiant Light, I don't see really a point outside of maybe... No, I don't see a point in this mod period. Powerful Friends could be nice if you're the caring type of person. Me, it kind of varies. Font of Wisdom, don't care. Don't care about my super. What we really want, Special Finisher, or Special Finder, rather. Special Finder is going to ensure every X amount of kills that we get a Finder brick. Now, some of the more experienced PvPers or PvEers will probably tell you that, you know, these are going to be not that great. And in higher end content, they aren't. You are not getting a lot of bang for your buck. However, this is for middle and low tier content, and you're going to be killing a lot of things, which means every 10 or so kills you're going to get another Finder brick, and that's just going to further supplement the continued use of Prometheus Lens. With our last slot, we have Special Ammo Scout, which could possibly give ammo to our teammates, which little bit of team synergy there. Maybe make you feel a little less bad when you take all of the kills with your burning laser of death. Well, that could work. Powerful Friends is also not a bad idea. I think we'll go... Yeah, we'll go Special Scout. We're feeling a little synergistic with our teammates, feeling a little generous today. Now, we had one more slot left in our chest. And I am just so torn. You know what? We are just gonna throw on Sniper Resist, just so no things and get us before we get in close enough to shoot our laser. Gotta love clan chat popping up in the middle of the video, and I think that about wraps it up. Other than fashion, of course. Here we are back at the spreadsheet. You see I've filled it out with aspects of the build. Now, it doesn't obviously tell the whole story about what's happening and how it works, but hopefully it'll be able to show you where your strengths and your weaknesses are of the build, and I think it does that pretty decently. So our grenade regeneration obviously was a big part of this, as was health regeneration. Surprisingly, team synergy ended up being a little better than I thought, with Special Finisher, Special Scout, and healing grenades all giving us boosts for our teammates, which is appreciated. If you're going to be the one getting all the kills, you might as well help out your teammates as well. I didn't actually fill out my other weapons, so anti-champion is kind of blank. It could be more, obviously. We were mostly focused on our weapons, so we had Firewalker, we had Surges, we had our instant reload from Flame Refraction, we had a little bit of boost to our melee from our aspects. The only damage reduction we actually had was the resist on our chest plate, which I would have liked more, but that's okay. The health regeneration should be able to make us as tanky as possible, combined with 100 resilience. Overall, I'd give it a decent DPS rating. You put a solar rocket launcher or anything else in your heavy slot, you can take advantage of your surges, and you actually have pretty good DPS there. For your ad clear, I'd say it's phenomenal. That's the best part of the build, and that's what it's good at. For our difficulty scaling, I'd say it's mid-level. We don't have a ton of anti-champion. We're not knocking down, you know, bosses left and right, but we can keep the room under control very well, and that's what we're good at. So all in all, I think it was a pretty good success. Some closing thoughts. My silly ass actually made that a recov mod, so I was at 90/90, but that is just another option. Yeah, it was an error, but there's so many options when it comes to build crafting. There's not a lot of wrong ones, and you can argue any way you really want to. We talked about plenty of options going through the build, and as I play with this, I might end up changing some of them. So now for some testing. I've chosen the Defiant Battlegrounds for this season. The reason I chose that is because it's not base patrol level difficulty, but it's not super hard either, and the enemy density is pretty good. You're always at least 5 power below your enemies in here, so it'll be a good way to test the build without babying it, but also without putting it through too much stress that I don't expect it to endure. After all, this is meant to be a mid-level build, not a high-level build. Something I could bring for ad clear during a raid, but not something I'd bring into a Grandmaster. That was overkill. One thing to note though, if you do run these as your test, the favors that pop up may skew your results just a little bit. For this build, they don't really play too much into its strengths, so I'm not too worried about that with this. But on ability heavy builds, I could see it being very impactful, especially melee builds. Melee builds would kind of perpetuate themselves in here very easily without any investment really at all. Hammer's a good way to stun a target too, gives them that nice knockback. Even if I'm not killing with it, I'm still going to be able to keep the target in place while I find their head. Well, I tried to revive this guy. But as of right now, yeah, I'm not sure where that overshield came from, but that might have been from reviving. Spend our armor charge there. Got some nice ammo back. Another thing to keep in mind if you're going to use a playlist activity to test is the current surges. I've already looked, and the surges here are arc and stasis. Yeah. That can also skew your data a little bit. So, try to test it somewhere. Set a baseline. You want to see your build at its worst, so it only gets better from there. You don't want to, again, you don't want to baby it too much. Honestly, this build is doing exactly what I wanted it to do, and that is melt everything in sight. The sunspots coming up from both the gun scorching and the incandescent scorching. It's fantastic. All the orbs are giving me that armor surge, or weapon surge. Restoration is everywhere. I don't think I ever saw my health drop below half. I was kind of just throwing grenades for the hell of it at that point. I didn't really even need to.
The ascendant plane.
And the other weapons I kind of just chose on a whim.
Of the pyramid, striking from beyond the threshold of reality.
I've always wanted to see this place. Looks a lot less posh than it sounds.
I don't really care to deal with this champion because I don't have anything to deal with him. I'm just going to ignore it. Solar doesn't have any built-in overload. My teammates deal with that one. It's an ad clear test after all, and not a champion test. And since we are a bit low on ammo, I'm going to hopefully get some Firewalker stacks using my super. I know there's a lot of void shields coming up here. Take a little bit extra to punch through. This is great, honestly. Feels fantastic. Looks like I got a ammo drop at some point. Didn't even get the finisher prompt there. Well, this guy I can finish. Might as well use my armor charge before I lose it in the transition. And we're back to 600 ammo, just like that.
A large contingent of Taken are assembled ahead. They're the last line of perimeter defense.
The witness is smart, using Taken to guard the back door.
A bit like keeping junkyard dogs. They're hostile, frightening, and they make a damn mess of the place.
Yeah, that's another nice thing too about having the hammer is you can just whack an enemy and bring him down to low, and can help you get your Firewalker stacks started, or even just the orbs of light. But how quickly we're already at ×4 Firewalker. I mean, and also every build is going to depend a little bit on the competency of your teammates. If you have a build that's going to rely heavily on you being the one getting kills, the skill difference between you and your teammates is going to play in that a little bit. Ow. I wanted that orb. Thank you. Oh, that was definitely not where I was pointing, but... Ow. Architects don't kill you, but they still hurt. Ow. Wow. Why am I still alive? This is great. Actually, I know why I'm alive. Restoration and then cure from the hammer. I hate when they're right on the edge. Things just don't hit them. The compulsive reloader in me just keeps wanting to reload. I'm not used to using a weapon that just reloads for me. I know there's quite a few in the game, but I don't typically use them. Now, I might be able to stop that guy, but it's probably going to take a lot of effort. Since I do apply Scorch on hit, but at the same time, I don't know how much Scorch off the top of my head, I'll be honest. That's something I should probably do more research on, but not something that's going to come up very often. Like I said, the goal of this build was not to ignite, it was to Scorch. And those things can sometimes go hand in hand, but sometimes it's just too much effort to get to 100 Scorch stacks. The only way I could probably do it is if a bunch of enemies stand around him and the incandescent does it. Yeah, I haven't even felt the need to throw my grenade. My grenade applies a bit of cure as well as restoration. And so you can use it in a pinch if you really need some extra health. Like if I, for example, was like running up to this guy. Just instant health. Well, that guy's dead too. So champion will just go bye-bye. Don't need you anymore. Yeah, overall it is I mean, it's a special weapon. It's meant to melt things quickly, and trace rifles are never bad at ad clear, but this just feels a little bit different. Once you start applying damage boost to rapid fire weapons, like it just becomes so ammo efficient. It's very nice. It's almost like using a machine gun, but in special form. And that feels very nice. Try to be a good teammate here and wait for my teammates to rally up. There we go. You thought you were going to evade me. That's crazy. Oh yeah. Give me that ammo back. And then immediately give me that surge back. Alright, here's another test. Can we stay alive while being constantly damaged by the darkness? And as long as I have some form of restoration, which I should, it should not be a problem. Fire sprites giving it to me. My grenade is a backup. Soul Invictus. Oh, there's an overload there. That's unfortunate. Yeah, I have volatile rounds. Really could only do barrier. Just recklessly running up to the boss. I don't even have to be doing that. Yeah, that guy's dead. Who's he? I wonder if anybody will grab that. Good joy. Wow. That's just so nice. Yeah, I think the best analogy is it feels like a machine gun. Like when you apply so many boosts to a single weapon that it transcends the ammo that it uses. It's a good feeling. On my other burning steps setup, I like to use a Drang with Rampage. And sidearms are already extremely high damage primaries. Once you start adding Rampage and Firewalker, it does damn near special weapon damage. It's pretty insane. I just love sidearms, so anything that'll make a sidearm good is good in my book. Roast them. I think I have one of those things. Oh, I do. Probably deposit that. Yeah, enemy density is just so nice for this build. All the clicks of it reloading itself are just so funny. I love it. Oh, come on. I wanted to finish with a boss. There. Yeah, overall this is really nice.
Attacked the last city, at least I understood it. The tower
I wasn't even using anything really optimal either.
I don't see the point of it.
Honestly, I would probably be running a solar heavy at this point. Take advantage of Firewalker and the surges. I'd love to be running Parasite. Parasite's a very funny gun when you have burning steps on. Usually that's my heavy, but all in all, I think it was a very good test, and I think we can move on. Thanks for watching, guys. Leave a comment down below if you'd like to see a specific build created, and like the video so I know to make more like it in the future. I know this is a long one, so thank you all for watching once again, and I'll see you next time.